Welcome back to Get Fit Guy. I'm a firm believer in the idea that the most important and meaningful thing I can do with this podcast is to give you all tools. Tools with which you'll be able to think critically about fitness advice you're reading or listening to or seeing. Since we're all on an unstoppable ride into entropy where even the universe will fall into a dark, cold, featureless state, at some point I will no longer be the Get Fit Guy. What then? Well, hopefully, then you can use the tools I've shared to analyze and assess fitness information and make informed, well-placed choices. If I just came on here every week and gave definitive answers, of which there are none, by the way, then it wouldn't be of long-term use, only short-term. So this week, I'm going to give you an insight into how my mind works and see if you agree. I'd love to hear everyone's ideas. So make sure to email me at getfitguy@quickanddirtytips.com. And while I'm on that topic, I'm all for discourse, but sending me a message that just says BS in response to an episode doesn't really bring anything to the conversation. But thanks, Mark, for the message. So a few days ago, as I was doom scrolling the Instagrams, I came across a video from a fitness influencer which said, "You're only ever a few months away from being a completely different person." Now, of course, I know what he's trying to say here. Come to my gym or buy my program and a whole new aesthetic awaits you. But that's not what's being said. A few months from being a completely different person. Sounds like something fun to dig into. So what makes a person? Well, according to various sources, a person is any entity with the moral right of self-determination and a personal identity. Now, this idea of a personal identity is an old one and the subject of many a thought experiment. And here's an idea for you. You're on trial for murder. And your defense? You are not the murderer because the murderer was a different person. Yes, the murderer is right-handed, just like you, and even has the same fingerprints as you. They look like you. You don't have any identical twin out there. But the murderer is not the same person as you because you've changed. That person liked AC/DC. You like Bob Dylan. That person has tonsils and an appendix, and you've had yours removed. That person was 30, and you're 40. So you cannot possibly be found guilty because that crime was committed by someone else. Now, it's pretty obvious that no incorruptible court of law would accept this argument. But at the same time, why not? Well, to find out and analyze if we're really able to become a completely different person in a few months, let's look at some ways we can establish personal identity or identity in general. Now, the first is what we call qualitative identity. So, in the case of a murder by stabbing, we could take a drawer full of knives. They're qualitatively the same in that they are all knives. But if I took one of those knives and bent it, it would become qualitatively different to the others, but still a knife. The actual murder weapon would be numerically the same. It's only that singular knife that had the experience of stabbing someone. So it's numerically identical to the murder weapon in the same way that 2 + 2 is numerically identical to 4. It's one and the same thing. So how does this carry over to human beings? Well, you are the same from birth until now. You may be missing an appendix and have grown a beard, but those are only qualitative differences. Numerically, you're the same, because if we had filmed every moment of your life from birth until now, Truman Show style, then at no point were you replaced by another person. You're qualitatively different, but you're numerically the same. So the first point in establishing if you can completely change is, if you lost 40 pounds and got a six-pack, would you have been replaced by a new, fitter person or only have changed in some quality? The answer is pretty clear. And this is called spatiotemporal continuity. We can look even further into this in order to make sure it does apply in all circumstances. Let's take the case of an ice cube which we place into a glass of water. The ice cube melts and it mixes with the water, so now the water contains the ice cube, but the water is not the ice cube. It's changed, so therefore we need a further distinction. The ice cube is only numerically identical if there's a spatiotemporal continuity which maintains form. Later ice cubes in a series of snapshots in time are water, not ice cubes. And this leads us to a thought experiment by a 17th century British philosopher called John Locke, and it's known as The Prince and the Cobbler. A certain prince wonders what it would be like to live as a lowly cobbler, and reciprocally, a cobbler is daydreaming of life as a prince. One day, the psychologies of both are swapped. The body of the prince comes to have all the memories, knowledge, and idiosyncrasies of the cobbler, whose psychology has in turn departed for the body of the cobbler. Now, after the swap, the person in the cobbler's body remembers being a prince and regards himself as the prince in every way except in body. And the cobbler regards himself as the cobbler in every way but in body. Are they right? Spatiotemporal continuity says they're wrong because we can trace their bodies back in an unbroken line to their birth with no changes. So Locke's view is that memory makes personal identity. The theory is called psychological continuity. And this view was challenged by 20th century philosopher Bernard Williams, who proposed the argument that lets us suppose that now, in the year 2023, a man suffers a psychological condition that leads him to believe he is Guy Fawkes, who was hanged in 1606 for the gunpowder plot to blow up the British Parliament. He seems to have all of the knowledge and psychology that we know of Guy Fawkes, so according to Locke's theory, this man is Guy Fawkes. But the curveball is that the same psychological condition occurs to another man. So if personal identity is psychological continuity, we have a problem. Because if A equals Y and B equals Y, then we can conclude that A equals B. And it's absurd to say that two men are equal in terms of personal identity. So Williams chose spatiotemporal continuity over psychological continuity because it avoids a problem known as duplication. Now, as usual, I only have 10 to 12 minutes, so digging super deep into the philosophy of self isn't possible, but I thought it would be fun to create a discourse on the idea. So what do you think? Can you really create a whole new you in a few weeks or months? Or have you just altered your qualities? And after that light piece of thinking, it's over to the emails, where Heather from Baltimore writes, I have been listening to the Get Fit Guy podcast since the beginning, and you are my favorite host. Why, thank you, Heather. Your mission of helping people work out effectively and safely is evident, and your sincerity shines through. Thank you. A few months ago, I started strength training. I do 3 sets of 10 to 15 reps. Once I feel this is not challenging anymore, I add a little more weight. That's very smart, adaptation. The last time I added 3 pounds to my arm weights, I'm not very strong, there was a noticeable difference in how my arms responded. My left side really struggled with the new weight much more than my right side. There was no pain or discomfort. I believe it's ability-based. I'm right-handed. My question is, how do I work with this? I've heard that symmetry is important. Well, maybe. What should my workouts look like? Should I keep the same weight for both sides but do more reps on my left to build strength? Do I add a bit less weight on the right side until the left side catches up? Well, hi, Heather. Thank you for the kind words and for being a long-time listener. That's pretty cool. So it's pretty common, if not actually the case in everyone, that we have what's called a bilateral deficit. So we have a difference between left and right, the front and the rear, and so on. And this is why I'm a big fan of using dumbbells and kettlebells for accessory work, because this helps you to close the deficit. The barbells are king for static strength development, but they won't do a terribly good job of evening you out. So I'd recommend using dumbbells or kettlebells. Choose a weight you can do for 8 to 10 reps on your weaker arm, and then do that arm first. Then perform the same number of reps on your stronger arm at the same load. This will trigger a training phenomenon called contralateral strength training that will help your weaker side get stronger because your body wants to balance things out and reapportion nerve stimulation. Do this for a few weeks and you might even have a brand new you. Get Fit Guy is a Quick and Dirty Tips podcast. Thanks to the team at Quick and Dirty Tips, Adam Cecil, Morgan Christensen, Holly Hutchings, and Davina Tomlin. I'm your host, Kevin Dunn. If you have a question for me, leave me a voicemail at 510-353-3104 or send me an email at getfitguy@quickanddirtytips.com. For more information about the show, visit quickanddirtytips.com or check out the show notes in your podcast app.